This is going to be a video walkthrough for this independent linearization activity. And so I've copy and pasted my data into Excel, and I've decided that I'm going to linearize the data by squaring the period. So in this column, I'm going to calculate the period squared. Then I'm going to use the next three columns to propagate my uncertainty of period when I square it. So in this column, I'll find the fractional uncertainty of period. In this column, I'll find the fractional uncertainty of period squared. Oh, should have written this as delta t over t. So the absolute uncertainty of period divided by the period measurement. So that means the fractional uncertainty of period squared would be delta t squared over the period squared measurement. And in this last column, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the absolute uncertainty of period squared. All right, now these columns are not how they will appear on your final really nice cleaned up table. They're just titles for the Excel sheet so that I can know what they look like. So I'll find period squared by squaring the B4 cell and then just dragging down those measurements. Okay, so I just squared everything in the B column to get period squared. Now to find the fractional uncertainty of period, I'm going to take 0.1 seconds, which is my fractional or my absolute uncertainty of my period, divided by my period measurement. And I'm just going to drag that down. So everything 0.1 divided by whatever period measurement I have gives me the fractional uncertainty of period. So the fractional uncertainty of period squared is just 2 times the fractional uncertainty of period. And so I'll multiply everything in column D by 2. And then the absolute uncertainty of period squared is just the fractional uncertainty of period squared times period squared. So I'll multiply my C column by my F column to get this. All right, so here we are, and I noticed that I have a lot of issues with significant figures, so I can adjust that here. So the first 2 period measurements have 1 significant figure, and then the last 3 period measurements have 2 significant figures, so I'll adjust that. There's no set way to do fractional uncertainty, so I'm just going to adjust all of these to a consistent number of decimal places, 3 decimal places. And then I can see that all of my period squared measurements are reported to 1 decimal place. So I'm going to round all of these absolute uncertainties up to 1 decimal place so they match my period squared measurements. All right. So the way it looks now, I could copy and paste this into my pretty Excel, my pretty table in my document, and we're also ready to make a graph. I'm going to choose scatter graph, and I'm going to move this graph to a new location so I have lots of room to do work. So I'll change it to move chart location, new sheet, and here we are. Now it's graphed some random garbage, so what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to clear that out. So I click on select data and I clear it out by clicking remove. I'm going to add a series, and that's going to be the series that we're going to graph. And so our X values are going to be the length of our string. So I'll highlight those those values for my X and our Y values. So we're doing the linearized graph in this case. So we're going to graph our period squared values. Click OK. And click OK again. And I can see that, oh yeah, this looks really nice. It looks like I have a nice linear data set at this point. I don't need this series title down here. So I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to add axes titles. Axes titles. There we go. I'm going to call my vertical axis. What we graphed on the vertical axis was period squared, comma, period t squared. So that's our symbol for period squared, slash the unit that we measured for period squared. So that would be a square second. So for our x-axis, that was the length of our string. Comma, the symbol that we're going to use for length. I'm going to choose capital L, slash, and then the unit we're going to use for length, which is a meter, lowercase m. Okay. So now that we have our axis labels in, what we need to do is add a trend line. So I add my trend line. I want a linear trend line. So it's chosen the right one already. I'm going to put the equation on the chart. And because this is the one that's supposed to be proportional, I'm going to set the intercept to 0. Looks a little funny. It's graphed like two lines on top of each other for some reason. So I'm going to click on that, the extra line, and I'm going to remove that. There we go. Now set intercept to 0. There we go, and display equation on chart. There we go. All right. So I have my best fit equation for my line that goes through the origin. That's my proportional relationship that I should have. Now we need to put in our uncertainties. Oh. Now we need to put in the maximum slope and the minimum slopes of this graph. Okay. Now, when I put in my maximum slope, I'm going to take my period squared value, and I'm going to add, you know what, let's add the uncertainties first, and then it'll make more sense when I do this. So I'm going to click on error bars. I'm going to do more options so I can specify the value of my error bars. All right, and now it's currently set on horizontal error bars. I can see that in the right-hand side, and the horizontal axis is our length of our string, which has an uncertainty of 0.01. And so since they're all the same, I can use fixed value and make them all 0.01. I push enter, and they'll all turn to 0.01. Okay, now the vertical error bars are a little trickier because they're all different. I'm going to specify value, go to custom, specify value, and then I'm going to highlight the positive and the negative values of my error bars that I calculated from the absolute uncertainty in my last column. And there we go. All right. So I can see from the error bars that I have that if I had a maximum slope, it'd go from this point to this point, and my minimum slope would go from this point to this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the maximum slope be equal to so I need my period squared value, and I want to have the lowest this can go. So I'm going to subtract my uncertainty. That'll give me the lowest point on the graph of the lower uncertainty bar. And I want the highest point on the uncertainty bar for the top of the max slope line. So I'm going to add the uncertainty. Okay. And I'm going to do the exact opposite for my minimum slope. I'm going to add the absolute uncertainty to the bottom, and I'm going to subtract the absolute uncertainty from my top point. Now, hang on, sorry. I'm going equals, I'm going to subtract my absolute uncertainty. Okay, so now I have these 2 points that I can make lines with for my min and my max slope. I'm going to click on my graph. I'm going to click on design, select data. I'm going to add another series. Okay, and I'm going to, for my x values, so I'm going to put the x values of my max slope in. And so, sorry, that's not right. I'm going to put my x values in, which are the length of the string. And my y values in, which are the max slope values that I've just calculated. Okay, I'm going to do the same for the minimum slope. I'm going to add another series. I'm going to highlight, I'm going to add my x values, which still are the length of the string, and my y values, which are my min and my minimum slope values. Okay, and click OK again. And you see I have orange dots and gray dots. Okay, and we just need to add a trend line to those. So I'm going to click the plus to add the trend line, linear. I need to add that to series 2. Click OK. There, so there's my max slope. I'm going to do the same thing again. Need another linear trend line, series 3. OK. There we go. There's my minimum slope. All right. So now we just need to do a little cleaning up. I want to add the equations of these two to my graph so I can get the slope really easily. And so I click on my line, I click on the graph icon, and I display equation on chart. Now I didn't set these intercepts to 0 because they're the min and the max slope, so it's okay if they don't. All right, now my graph is pretty much finished. My font's a little small, and so what I'll do is I'll go to home, and I'll make it something bigger so when I copy and paste it into my document, it's more legible. So I'll move it up to like 14. All right, so I have all of my equations of all my lines that I can get the slopes from, and I'm ready. I'm finished with my data processing. That's the end.